Hello and happy Sunday. Well, I hope you guys had a good week last week and that you are all maintaining social distancing and washing your hands and doing all the things that you need to do, helping around the house if your parents need help. And I look forward to reading your answers on the discussion board. We've only got 3 weeks left, so stay with it. You can do this. Come on. We're together in this. Yay, yeah. So this week, you'll notice that we're in chapter 12. I believe that's a chapter, and it's on reform, the reform movements of the time. So really quickly, let's look at some of the major themes through American history. One is going to be political. The creation, the independence, and the creation of the Constitution. Political, how do you govern? There's an economic between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, and the economy. What makes us a sovereign nation? What gives us power and leverage? It's money, 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 money. This is a big deal. But we're not all about politics, and we're not all about money. We're also about what's going on in the society. What's happening in the world that people are living in? Well, slavery is a huge deal, as we talked about last week. And this week we're going to talk about something else that really defined the modern world. I don't know if the modern world is the right way to describe it, but everything that kind of happened after the Civil War. There's this time period between the 1820s and the 1870s where we call that I'm having a moment, all the reform movement, Second Great Awakening. Hey, Miss Gone. So during the Second Great Awakening, a lot of things are happening. Now, and these are social movements, social events, reform movements that are slowly working their way into the society, into people's everyday lives. And some of these movements and ramifications of these movements are with us today. Quite a few, really. One of the things that, begins some of these movements, so it's religiously based. It is steeped in Protestantism and evangelical Protestantism, and so have that as part of the Venn diagram, okay? So one circle is Protestantism and religion, very important part of this, and during the Second Great Awakening, new types of Christianity are created. Seventh-day Adventists, the Shakers, Mormons, Southern Baptists. There are different kinds of religious, very basic evangelical movements within Christianity that is forming. Now, on the other side of that, there is this concept of where women, a woman's place in this time under the auspices and the laws of something called femme covert, FEMECOVERT. Women have to be under covert, under the power or under like an umbrella. They're underneath the men in their household. So they're either part of their husband's family or their father's family. Now, when I say under, they have no rights at all. Zero rights. They do not have rights to their children. They do not have rights to their paycheck if they work. That everything that's their property when they come into the marriage becomes their husband's property. So really, husbands can rape their wives. Husbands can do pretty much whatever they want to do. They can beat their wives. They can even kill their wives, and there's no ramification for it. And so really, truthfully, women have no power when you look at it from that perspective right off the bat. Women have no power. However, what's very unique about this is the middle part of this Venn diagram, where the church, so a woman's place was either in the home or the church. And the middle part of the Venn diagram is women in the church. So this is that middle part of that Venn diagram is where women get their power. So how do they do that? Well, most of the women hold some kind of purse strings, meaning money in the family. Why? Why would women have any money? Well, women will have money to go to the market, to get groceries, to get things like that. And so women do have access to money. Now, within the church, as they work within the church, confines of the church, they begin social movements. And the social movements are part and parcel of the way the church works in the community. So we're going to reform something because it's in God. It's part of my Christian duty to do so. Okay, so there is this. Women are manipulating the system that they are confined to have more power and leverage. Is it easy? Absolutely not. It is not easy. And the first way that they're using this power is with movements like abolition. The abolitionist movement, you have a lot of men in this movement too. So William Lloyd Garrison, and there are quite a few men who are part of abolition. And so it's women doing their Christian duty to free slaves, to abolish slavery because it is the right thing to do. And that movement really grows. Now, as women are part of the abolitionist movement, they recognize as they are working within that movement that they too have no rights at all. So you can see, I hope, how women's suffrage movement, to be able to get the vote and have women have rights, is really, it comes from the abolitionist movement. It is a natural progression of that movement, and it comes out of that. So the women's suffrage movement, though, is really, there are some men who agree with it, but to a particular degree. So the real kind of the edge for this movement that like people would agree women should be able to have their own money or own certain things, but the vote, suffrage? Oh, wait. Now that's going too far. Now you're asking women to become political. You're asking women to do something that they believe God did not give them the ability to do. So under the auspices of Femme Covert, and even with the extrapolation of the women's suffrage movement out of abolition, and there's so many connections between the two, men could be on board with women's movements to temperance, like alcohol, no alcohol, and things like that, because even prison reform, because that seemed like the Christian duty. It's a good thing to do, but whoa, now you're getting into politics, and that is, God didn't give women the ability to think politically, and therefore the whole family setup is going to just be destroyed if you try to have women or allow women to think about politics. And those were huge arguments. And quite honestly, there are still many people who would argue that women are the weaker vessel, women are the weaker sex, women can't do, shouldn't be given power, leadership roles and roles with power because they don't want them to. But it's a power. It's about power. And why do I say that? Because it is. And so as we see the women's suffrage movement, abolition, women's suffrage movement evolve and take on a life, you also see around the same time the concept, or another movement called the cult of domesticity. And the cult of domesticity is really about women being good religious people and doing what their husbands tell them to do, and that they are chaste, so they're virgins when they're married, and also that they don't actually enjoy sexual intercourse or sex of any kind, that they perform sex as a duty to their husband, but that if they have any enjoyment out of the act, that it cheapens them. It makes, if you like sex, according to the cult of domesticity, then you're pretty close to being a whore, even if you're married and you're only having sexual intercourse with your husband. It's a really big deal, this cult of domesticity. And your discussion board question is going to be tied to this. So during the reform movements, there's a lot of social events happening that eventually have influence on politics and influence on economics. But it's a social movement that is driving the politics and the economics. So in 1848, the women's suffrage movement is created at what's called the Seneca Falls meeting in New York. And at that time, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony and Lucretia Mott and various other women and men met up in Seneca Falls, New York, to really have the very first meeting of the women's suffrage movement. And a lot of people were really on board with it until they got to suffrage, to voting rights. And that's where they lost a lot of folks. And for 72 years, women fought against other women who really believed in the cult of domesticity, who really believed that women shouldn't be thinking about politics, who really believed that women should just be in the home and take care of the husband and family, and that's all they should be doing, and they should have no other role than that. And so women were actually arguing against women, and we still find that today. Unfortunately, women can be their own worst enemy, and what are you going to do? I mean, we're all trying to work through that even now in the 21st century. But these concepts, these ideas of women's role, they're thousands of years old. But here in the United States, the Second Great Awakening is it changes the dynamics. It changes a paradigm, and it begins the movements forward of newer thoughts, of more progressive ideas. And those movements really change how society tries to change itself from within. So one of the 20th century movements that really have kind of the basic principles and ideas that come from the Second Great Awakening were civil rights movement and the gay rights movement. And just right now, we're living in what Well, the movements of today are connected to the movements that began during the Second Great Awakening. Now, prison reform, it was the first time we ever saw prison reform. It was the first time we ever saw mental health reform, asylums where people would go, and husbands, if their wives did not have intercourse with them, if they told them no, or if they were postpartum depression, anything that we know now as either a woman's right to say no or a real mental health issue like postpartum depression, husbands could literally put their wives in an asylum for these things and remarry, and it was quite acceptable. And these places were horrid places. Even into the early 20th century, they were not. They were horrible places to be sent. Bottom line. There's also the temperance movement. A temperance movement came about. It was all about alcohol and not drinking any alcohol. And eventually that led to enact, a law that led to prohibition in the 1920s. So one of the reasons why temperance movement was able to get some legs and move along is because husbands, because they worked and their money was their own, and they had to give their wives money in order to go get groceries and food and stuff like that. Husbands in many places didn't do that, and instead they went to the local pub and they would drink their wages away. They would take their wages, and then there was nothing for the wife and kids, and then the husband would come home and beat the wife and beat the kids. And this was prevalent. This was far more prevalent than you can imagine, and it was so prevalent that the temperance movement had legs. I mean, it was a real thing, and it led to prohibition. Now, you realize that that didn't last. Prohibition didn't last, and even now, under this COVID-19, stay-at-home order, all of the ABC stores, the liquor stores, are still very much open all over the country. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And we also see right now that we have the stay-at-home order that there is an increase in child and spousal abuse. So even now in the 21st century, there's a correlation between alcohol consumption and abuse. So while we don't live under the temperance laws, some of the basic principles that created them are still very much in existence today. We also, prison reform, obviously I mentioned, but as we're looking forward, looking forward into the future from the mid-1800s, the Second Great Awakening changes this social dynamic basically because of reform movements, because of new religious practices and new types of Christianity, into a larger, broader view of what it is to be Christian. So from after the Second Great Awakening and Seventh-day Adventists and Mormons and Shakers and you have and Southern Baptists, you have as a result of all those changes in the mid-1800s, it opened up the doors for other kinds of Christian churches, Church of God, Church of Christ, the Elevation Church. There's all kinds of extrapolations. It opened the doors for new types of practices of Christianity. That's a pretty big deal in this country, especially in the South. Where there are many, many, many different kinds of churches, here in any given city. It also is the springboard by which we do have social grassroots movements in the 20th century, and then now even in the 21st century. So it really plays a tremendous role in how Americans see themselves and how Americans are able to use grassroots social issues to create a movement. And and that really still defines us very much today. And some of these movements create new laws, new politics. It affects politics because it creates new laws. The women's suffrage movement starts in 1848, and it takes until 1920 to actually create the 19th Amendment, which gives finally women the right to vote. That's a long time. So, and it's still going forward. We still don't have an equal rights amendment, which just says that women should be paid equal to men for the same job. And feminism, if you look it up in the dictionary, it just means that if you are a feminist, you want equal justice under the law for the same job or same political voice. That's really all it is. It has nothing to do with whether you're gay or straight or whether there's any, like, you like men or you don't like men, or men like women or don't like women. It has nothing to do with any of that. It is really, really simple. It's like one or two sentences. It's just basically, if you're a feminist, you believe that women should be equal in the eyes of the law and in society. Basically, that's it. Super, super simple. And I think I say most everyone, I don't really know, but I think that, that's, and I hope to think that that is how we all feel these days, but only you know, and only you know what your family believes. But it doesn't have to do with women hating or man hating or any of that kind of stuff. So that's an argument that's made to try to tag the concept of feminism with negative things, being a feminazi. That it's just there are people who are very they really do believe strongly and will talk very strongly about women's rights, but does not make them a man hater, truly. So I think that's important. So we have politics in the Constitution back in 1787, and that's, and we're still dealing with constitutional rights, even in COVID. Is it the federal government's responsibility under the Constitution, or the state's responsibility under the Constitution? And we still have conversations about the 10th Amendment, giving states certain rights. It's not actually put into the Constitution. And so, this is still an issue. This is still something that we talk about now. So the Constitution, big deal in the history of America. Economics. Economics rule the world. So who are we economically as a nation? That's why unemployment right now, and the staggering unemployment, and the CARES Act has been enacted, because if we do not have a strong economic base, then we become vulnerable. So economics, big deal. Then it comes to society. Where are we in society? Who are we as a society? What do we believe in as a society? Where do we get the ideas and the concepts that we believe in as a society? What is a grassroots movement? Where does that come from? Second Great Awakening. So Second Great Awakening is still just like the Constitution, just like the economy, just like those very beginning things. It's still very, very much with us today. As slavery defined our nation, by us institutionalizing it, we have movements that address racism in this country, and those movements find their history in the Second Great Awakening. So we're still very connected to the mid-1800s, and in many ways, it's like this foundational piece of the foundational ideas, concepts remain the same, but the issues are different. So as we go forward, but this is where we begin to see them fomenting. They're being created. They are people begin to society and people in general begin to recognize their place and their power, their personal power to make change in the country. And the Second Great Awakening gives them that ability, even under the worst auspices, even under the worst conditions. Women made a huge change in this country, and they did it from the church and utilizing the church and the idea of what it is to be a good Christian to move the country forward. And it was very difficult to argue their points if you can't argue against good Christian values. So they took that to the nth degree and really were a force for good overall. And I think that that's important. So, that's really what I want you to take away from this as you read through your work for the week. It's just one chapter. Don't forget to do the inquisitives. There's so much really in every one of these chapters. Honestly, these mini lectures, I feel sometimes are just, I have to focus on just one thing in order to get a mini lecture out of it. And I think that it's important to see the reform movements as a springboard to modern movements and a way that we address social issues in the country. And it was successful. I think now it doesn't have to be Christian based, but like it was back then, because women, who started it had to utilize that niche of being in the church to manifest these movements. But in today's world, I think you don't need Christianity as a means by which to do good in the world. I think that no matter what religion you are, and really whatever religion you are, philosophy you live by, I believe the principles remain the same for all of us, which is that we try to do the best we can. We try to do no harm. We try to help each other in our community, in our home, and be good citizens of the United States, but also global citizens. So, keep that in mind as you're reading forward. This is a real critical period in American history, as if all the periods are pretty critical. But enjoy the rest of your week. Don't give up, some of you guys. I know it's been kind of tough, but we're 3 weeks away from the end of the semester. You got it. You got it. You got this. And I'm here to help you. If my email is full, do not worry. Do not panic. No way. Don't worry or panic. I am on this. I've already been on it with IT last week, and sometimes emails are coming through and sometimes they're not, but never fear. I am here, and I will, as soon as I get your emails, I will respond. Okay, everybody? Well, again, have a great week. Love you. Mean it. And I'll see you next week. Okay.